Let's go. All right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have so many people in the boardroom to participate with us tonight. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. To the United States stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty for all. All right. Thank you. Item 1.3 is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Do we have any discussion? I will just add that we might want to move item 1.4 down on the agenda until Trustee McCarty gets here. Okay, he is coming in, so never mind. Scratch that. We talked long enough. All right. Any other discussion about the agenda? All right. All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. We will move to item 1.4, which is recognition of Caden Rosengarten, our Nevada State Champion for the 2023 sixth grade Scholastic Challenge. And Trustee McCarty, you're just in time to give us an introduction.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And had a note. Probably should mic up. I apologize for my tardiness. Thank you very much for that, Madam Chair. Amy Price, the Spring Creek Middle School counselor, wrote the following introduction for this item. Spring Creek Middle School, and if I may personally add, Elko County School District is proud to announce that Caden Rosengarten has been named the Nevada State Champion for the 2023 sixth grade Scholastic Challenge that is sponsored by the American Scholastic Achievement League. Caden participated along with 4,000 students across the nation in demonstrating his knowledge on a 60-minute, 100-question test that included sections on general knowledge, such as food, art, sports, music, current events, entertainment, mythology, etc., language and literature, geography, history, science, and mathematics. The questions were not related to a specific curriculum, but were selected to reflect the general knowledge and educational levels expected of sixth grade students in the United States. Spring Creek Middle School Titans congratulate Caden Rosengarten for this amazing accomplishment and are so proud of you. I personally am not surprised by Caden's accomplishment, as I have had the privilege of knowing him and his family for a number of years through scouting. I have watched Caden progress through the Cub Scout program into earning the Boy Scout rank of first class scout in less than a year and a half. By the way, while he had 60 minutes to complete this exam, he did it in less than 30 minutes. Caden, because I'm a bit late, I couldn't quite see everybody that's out there. However, I believe that Caden is joined this evening by his sister Abigail and his brother William, both of whom are following Caden down the scouting trail. His father Dale, scoutmaster for his troop. His mother Nicole, who is one of Elko County School District's talented nurses and will be addressing the board in just a few moments. And the Santos family. Both Vanessa and RJ Santos are also members of the district staff. Vanessa's teaching kindergarten and RJ working here at Central in IT with Mac's team. So please join me in congratulating Caden in his outstanding achievement. Going to start on that end and start shaking hands.
Good job. Thank you. Congratulations, Caden. That's awesome.
It's okay to smile. Good job.
All right, one more round of applause as he goes to his seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me on that.
All right, well, thank you for that introduction, and Caden, congratulations. We are excited to see what you do with your academic career from here forward. And thank you, those who came to support him. It's awesome to see. All right, any other comments from the board before we move on? I think we're just congratulations.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll move to item 1.5, receive a presentation from Northeastern Nevada Regional Professional Development Program. This is a non-action item. Welcome.
Good evening. Let me just get set up. So I believe that Mac is going to put the presentation up so everyone can see it. While that gets ready, let me just introduce myself. My name is Annie Hicks. I am the new director at the Northeastern Nevada Regional Professional Development Program. I was here last fall as the assistant director and had a chance to just share with the board some of the work that we have been doing specific to Elko County in partnership with Ray Smith, the school improvement director. And that work actually started under CJ's leadership when he was the school improvement director. So tonight, Ray, who could not be here with us because he's at an accreditation workshop, Ray and I wanted to just share back with the board and hopefully the district at large some of the success and highlights of our year in partnership together. So I don't know if the presentation is up.
All right.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Does Mac have the presentation?
He does. And it is just not the end of the world if it doesn't show up. I can. Is it already on? Oh, there it is. I'm so sorry. That's my fault. Yep. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Just a brief overview. Our organization is actually funded through the state legislature, and we were formed in the 70th session. And I think one of the things that's really critical to know is that the RPDP statewide was created with the intention that every teacher, every school leader would have access to high quality professional learning at no charge, because cost can truly be a barrier, as we know sometimes when we're entering into challenging fiscal times. And so the legislature wanted to show that they had statewide support for high quality learning for teachers and leaders. And so through that, 3 small entities were formed that work collectively together across the state. Some of the things that I think are really key to know about our work is we ground our work in professional learning standards, both the state standards and also the national standards. We serve by request. So we don't come in and tell anyone what they need to learn or what they should be doing. We serve at the request either of districts, schools, leaders, or teachers. That can be a single classroom teacher reaching out to say, I really want to grow in teaching mathematics. It could be a district saying, we really want to support English learners across the district, and we need something that touches at every school site. The other thing that I think is really key that I want to highlight, because we've just finished compiling this, is that every year we put together a very substantial report that we share back with the legislators and other members of the governing body that oversee our work. And in that report, which is about 300 pages, we have statistically significant results that show the impact of the work we do across our region. And so that is something that will be emailed to President Dastrup in the fall by September 1st, and then of course shared back with our legislative group. But I have to say that as someone coming in to the director role, it's really exciting to me to see the statistically significant results, because I feel like we can really say, hey, the return on investment for working with us is something we can prove. With that, I also just want to give a shout out to the staff that we have, because they truly are amazing. These are individuals who work within our region, but they are also known across the state and frankly across the nation as experts in their field. So we have Darrell Kiernan, Connie Thompson, Holly Marich, Trina Parker. We just brought on Stephanie Karsrud, Tom Browning, Natalie Troughton, and then Jennifer Puentes is the glue that holds us all together and keeps us on track. When I came in the fall, we talked about some of the things we were going to do, but really my hope tonight is to be able to just give you a snapshot of what we actually did. So over the course of this last academic year, we worked with 36 instructional leaders from Elko County across 3 different workshop series. One was how to use the Nevada Educator Performance Framework as a tool for teachers' growth. So that's the evaluation tool that administrators use. We really shifted our focus though to provide coaching and effective feedback. We looked at the administrators' instructional leadership standards, and we did a workshop for administrators who really wanted to grow as leaders. And then we also started something new that was really neat. We partnered with the school district to do a prospective instructional leadership workshop. So these are individuals who had their leadership licensure, but had not yet applied for that kind of leadership position. And so they worked with us throughout the year to learn really specific details to being a site administrator. What is it like to be a building principal? How do I manage the budget? How do I deal with safety? And so each of those sessions featured something different to try to help really build the internal capacity of future leaders. We also provided professional learning for educators across the district. A total of 556 teachers participated with us this year. That is 83% of the total staff. Some of the ways that educators participated is in the RISE program, which is something we do for new teachers or new to the district teachers. We worked with the media science specialists, the computer science ambassadors. And then this year, we really invested in schools with the continuous improvement process, which leads to the development of their school performance plan and goals that they're going to work towards throughout the year. And we provided a number of sessions that were aligned with their goals. And that was a really neat shift in our work that we hadn't done previously, but with that new plan from the state, it allowed us to hopefully provide professional learning that was much more targeted and focused on what schools and teachers needed most. And then across the district in this past year, we worked or provided 84 separate professional learning sessions. And when you think back to a staff of 8 people, I just have to say that's pretty incredible. Also one of 6 districts in our region. So we have 5 other districts we serve as well. But we really were honored to have the opportunity to work with schools in other ways as well. Thinking about like grade level teams and professional learning community structures, supporting new teachers, especially teachers who are coming with a variety of experiences. We worked a lot around literacy support, individual coaching, working with English learners, and then of course, grade level teams who set their own specific goals for what they wanted to accomplish. And then because we're a regional group, I just wanted to quickly highlight that a number of leaders and educators from the district also participated in things that we offer across our region. So we provide licensure courses that teachers can use to remove provisions on their license. We also provide the computer science endorsement courses. And then we have a variety of workshops we offer throughout the year that teachers and leaders can take in order to earn professional learning hours towards their license renewal. And as we look ahead to 23-24, probably the part I'm most excited about is that I've already been working with Ray very closely to talk about what worked well this year, the success that we had, what lessons we learned, and also thinking ahead to what support schools will need as we move forward. So we'll continue to work on the continuous improvement process with schools. We had more schools sign up for support in the coming year than we had this year, which is exciting. We also are going to be supporting the district performance plan in a consulting role. And then I already have multiple requests from schools for professional learning on those district allotted days next year that is aligned to their school performance plan goals. Again, we'll be working with the new teachers through RISE. And then we've already begun planning for some mentorship opportunities and opportunities to support leaders through walkthrough observations. I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to participate in that, but it's where you go through a classroom for a set period of time with specific instructional goals in mind that you're looking for, so you can provide feedback to teachers that they can use right away. So really trying to continue to develop and boost our instructional leadership alongside boosting our instructional practice in a classroom, because those two go hand in hand. And then with that, those of you who looked through the agenda notes, you saw lots of attachments. I just wanted to share some of the pieces of evidence. Some of what was shared, I shared 4 specific highlights. So out of those 84 sessions, I shared just 4, and I tried to give you a snapshot. This is what it looks like when we partner with a school for one session, let's say at an elementary level, one school at a middle school level, a K-12 combined school, and then one snapshot from some of the work we did with leadership. And through that, I just hope to give you a sense that, again, part of our work always comes back to the data and the evidence, making sure that's shared back. So CJ can attest to this. He gets a number of emails throughout the year. Each time we do one of those sessions and we create that snapshot report, it gets emailed off to CJ, who can then share it with the appropriate leadership or with the school site administrators And we use that data internally to try to improve what we're doing in turn for teachers and for leaders. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to share these highlights. Like I said, it's just so exciting to see what we've been able to do over the last year. I'm really excited to see what happens in the coming year. Any questions?
Thank you. Any
Yeah.
questions for Annie?
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
First, it's been interesting to watch the professional development program grow from when it started
Mm,
to what it is now.
yeah.
And it's very impressive. I know I said this the last time you were here. I wish we could have you all to ourselves because you do such good work.
Thank
your
you. Yeah.
You and your team. What can we do as a board to support professional learning?
I appreciate that question. So the national group for professional learning is called Learning Forward. And one of their most recent reports talks about the role that a school board and school leaders can take to support professional learning. And one of the suggestions that's made in that report is that leadership across the school can really support professional learning by prioritizing it in policy and prioritizing it in terms of time. So making sure that it's accessible to people and also making sure it's something that people can do during their contract hours. And I recognize that can be a real challenge. I think we got pretty creative this last year. I think we're going to be even more creative in the coming year. But I think having a focus on professional learning is what will drive that work forward. And really, I would say we know research year after year shows the most important factor in any student's learning is their teacher. There are a lot of other factors that have impact, but teachers have 2 to 3 times the impact that any of those other factors do. So when we think about where we spend our time, energy, and money, it really needs to be on our teachers. And I would argue our leaders as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Don't get me started. I get so excited. I could just.
Any other
Okay.
questions from the board? All right, Annie, thank you. And
Thank you
for
so
your
much.
thank you
Yeah.
for your excitement in working to help improve our district. We love it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, we'll move on to item 1.6, receive a presentation from the Elko County School District School Nurses.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm gonna pull up. I just stuck my junk drive in here earlier. And view. And where does it say slideshow?
On the same row as file under.
Oh, there it is.
examinations.
Okay, sorry. Always looks different when it's right in front of you. So I'm Bobby Shanks. I'm the school nurse coordinator, and I brought with me Skylar Basanias. She's one of our district nurses, and Nicole Rosengarten from Spring Creek Middle School. And we have a couple of our peers in the crowd. I gave you guys, the board, a handout that just kind of summarizes the health office data. I think over the last couple of years, our role has morphed and then remorphed again. So I thought it was time to maybe share what we really try to do. Just keep kids in school. On that data sheet, I listed out for you district-wide, and it might not look like a whole lot, but when you put it together as a whole, you know, we have 640 students approximately that have significant health conditions, meaning that they have an action plan in place where they could require emergency care at any time during the school day. So those are spaced throughout the district. I listed out the illness injury visits there. And I was pretty proud to say when I calculated out, I had to calculate it out a couple times, that we had a 91% return to class rate, which means that of the kids who visited us with a complaint, whether they were sick or had an injury, they were able to go back to the classroom, which is what our role is to keep kids in the classroom so that they can learn. So I thought that was a good number. We listed out the hearing and vision screenings that we do. Those are necessary. I would say we'd probably do them even if they weren't mandated, but they are mandated screenings. And then the number of students that were referred. I think over the past several years, we've seen hearing screenings, our hearing referrals go down because of the newborn screening program that we do with newborn babies at the hospital. I think lots of defects are picked up there, and so they don't go all the way down into the schools. And then I listed out Every year I calculate out the full-time equivalencies, FTEs, based on student health needs. And we're pretty close where national recommendations are at 22. Oh, sorry, I forget about that when I'm looking at it in my hand. And what we currently have in our schools and working with us are 21. I put on here, I didn't give you guys this, but I can give you our slides. We have 17 school nurses at school sites. We've been a model for the state in a lot of issues. We've started before I started with the district many years ago, but where we've had a nurse in just about every school. And I think other counties work towards that, but availability of nurses is hard to come by in schools. So we have 17 school nurses at school sites, 2 nurses on, I call it our strike team, where they're available for emergency subbing for when somebody calls in sick or is gone. They go out and do the screenings at each school so that we have a consistent team doing screenings. And then they help train. Actually, all of our nurses are CPR and first aid instructors. We do medication training, those 640 emergency action plans we talked about. We go out and train our staff so that they know how to recognize symptoms and take care of those kids in the classroom or field trips. And then one of those FTEs is myself. And then we have one procedure nurse who provides additional coverage. A couple of our schools, just by nature, are very large: Elko High School, Spring Creek High School, Flagview. And as such have a high caseload. So we help out with different procedures and whatever might happen that we need to take care of there. But I think which one? And I'll take notes.
So we'll go into a little bit about what we do as school nurses. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the iceberg analogy here. I don't know if it's too early or too late for the last couple of weeks events, but on the top here, we show oftentimes what we hear, and not that everyone may believe that this is the only things that we're doing, but we get, we've got school nurses do ice packs, Band-Aids, wet clothes, and they want to send all the kids home. But below that surface, you can see, as Bobby touched on, a lot of those. We have a lot of other items that we are working on with our students, with the school staff, and in our nursing roles here. From our screening to injuries and incident reports, mental health support, staying up to date on evidence-based practice, delegation and staff training, education, crisis intervention, communities, fostering community and state partnerships, medical procedures, and chronic health management and planning. A lot of our work comes from the National Association of School Nurses and adhering to those standards of practice. Each of you guys, I believe, has a handout on this also. This is the standard of practice for school nurses, and we'll kind of delve through each of these different areas here. We'll go ahead and begin with standards of practice as that outer ring. So as school nurses, we use evidence-based practice. We adhere to the Nursing Code of Ethics, the Nevada State Nurse Practice Act, and the NRS that's associated with that. We have to practice within our scope and standards of nursing practice. We adhere to evidence-based clinical guidelines and stay up to date, as well as participate in many National Association for School Nurse position statements. And for that, those qualifications to be a school nurse is that we must hold a valid license with the Nevada State Board of Nursing. We are, to be considered a school nurse, you do have to have your bachelor's degree in nursing as that entry level with the field of education there also. We also have to be licensed with the Board of Education as a school nurse. Some additional certifications that many of our nurses are national board certified as school nurses. And as part of our ECSD requirement, we are CPR instructors, first aid instructors, and stop the bleed instructors. If we start to move into this circle, that first circle there we see is community and public health. Some of those items that we are working on in our offices is that we have telehealth available in each of our school nurse offices to help reduce that barrier in access to care. That is through a partnership with Nevada Health Centers. They're able to see a provider, may not be local, but they are able to see an available provider directly from our offices with a telehealth cart that we have available there. We focus on cultural competency, those health screenings that are required, health equity, access to healthcare. Again, collaboration with our community providers, health promotion of our students and staff. We work to break down those barriers to social determinants of health, whether that could be access to food, clothing, housing, all of those external factors that can potentially affect someone's health and access to education as well. And we perform disease surveillance. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Nicole.
Hi. Okay, so moving on in the circle, we're going to go over quality improvement. So for that, we're looking at our documentation, our data collection, our meaningful health and academic outcomes, and we use our emergency action plans and individualized healthcare plans to kind of assess where we've went with the student throughout the year, if it's working, if it's not, if we need to make changes. We have office statistics, which is where we pull together our data to share with you tonight. All the nurses have to do that in their own office as well. And then we use evidence-based research. So for leadership, we are advocates. We also teach our students to advocate and how to do that, what that looks like. We do professional development, continuing education, funding and reimbursement, professionalism, EHR technology, policy development and implementation. The next slide. So I just pulled one page from, so that any, oh, I didn't turn my page. NEPF. This is an example of kind of how nurses in the state, like the chief nurses, work together throughout the state to come up with one that was made just for nurses so we can evaluate ourselves effectively, similar to how we're using, for teachers. And so the one I pulled was for communication and collaboration, which is what we're doing here tonight. So, we should get 4s on our evaluation. But just an example of how we're actually putting those things into action. Then for care coordination, that's where we're educating. We educate families, students, staff, anybody that needs it. Chronic disease management, safe schools, stop the bleed instructors, the CPR first aid instructors, mental health support, emergency response, interdisciplinary teams, nursing delegation, motivational interviewing and counseling, transition grade level planning, their student care plans, student self-empowerment. And all this really, what's the importance of all of it? It comes back to the kiddos, the students. We need them to be in school so they can learn. We want them to be healthy, safe, and ready and able to learn. So, any questions?
Questions from the board?
I just have a comment that I think we're fortunate to be able to have nurses in our schools, because I know, like in Salt Lake, they don't have a nurse for every school, and they're sharing a nurse to a lot of schools. So I feel fortunate that we're able to have that. And I thank you for, I was telling Bobby earlier that with CASA, I don't have a lot of experience with the nurses, but just in one of my CASA cases, and the nurse has been so helpful and attends the meetings we have about her, and it's just been very helpful to her. And even finding her glasses, an eye appointment, it was very helpful.
We should mention that in collaboration that we work with our local Lions Club, and they've supported us in our National Association of School Nurses memberships. Historically, they helped us if kids were in need and needed glasses or appointments, and we'd fill out an application. But now the National Association will give us as many as long as we're members. We can get unlimited if we need them. And so thanks to Lions Club as well, because they support us there.
That's good to know.
I just want to thank you for the presentation and for the work you do in general. We really appreciate you. So.
Thank you. You as well.
So I have a couple of questions just real quick. So I was just looking at your statistics, and it looks like in the second semester, your average visits per day are incredibly higher. What's the difference? What happens between semester 1 and semester 2 that you get this uptick?
So that's not semester 1 to semester 2. I had just combined the numbers there. Normally, so the last 3 years kind of threw off our statistics. But prior to that, I have lots of statistics that are in order. So if we go back to 18, 19, they look really good. But I just combined semester 1 and 2. And then amongst our schools, we have different size schools, different needs at different schools. And so those are the average visits. Like if I averaged them all out, it came up to like, so I wanted you to know that that's not semester 1, semester 2. It's 14 to 41 per day, depending on
Okay.
the school.
Gotcha.
Because it really wasn't relevant when you look at one of our really busy schools, even elementary to high school. It's just so different, 14 to 41. And if I averaged those, it really brought down the 41, and it wasn't really representative of what is happening at that school. So I listed them like that.
That's perfect. So just one other question, because like you said, your role has changed and then changed again several times over the last couple of years. And I'm happy to not see you every meeting, Bobby, and I'm sure you're happy to not see us every meeting. But have you seen since COVID a change in what you see students for? Do you see more students for mental health than you did prior to COVID? Do you see more students for other kinds of challenges? Or do you feel like if you look at your statistics, you've kind of gone back to pre-COVID type visits? Or
That's what it feels like and what it looks like to me. I'm not in the school every day, just some of the days. What do you guys think?
Well, and
The numbers are pretty remarkably similar.
they are. Prior to that time of COVID, they actually say, physical symptoms will often present initially first. So we see a lot of that and have to filter through. It's difficult to make that exact data, but I've read and researched numbers approximately around school nursing. We see approximately 30% of students are presenting potentially with physical symptoms, although they could be having, something mental health wise going on. And so part of that interviewing and assessment process, we do work through that. I've spent a little bit less time in the school this year than previous years. But I would say that those visits from elementary through high school are definitely there. And that we are seeing some increase. We don't have that set statistic wise, but minor coping difficulties, and so maybe you don't want to do that. You might have a stomach ache, but we would have to go back and compare data from during those times to give a better answer to that.
Because I would say, just from my experience in the previous 17 years in school sites, a lot of school nursing is mental health and figuring out why their stomach hurts. Could be because they didn't eat. It could be because they're sick. Most oftentimes it's anxiety for a test or somebody's being mean or, the whole gamut.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's weeding through that.
any other questions? Okay, thank you. We appreciate the presentation and again, the work that you do all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we'll go to item 1.7, receive a presentation from Zero Suicides, Elko County.
And I have a PowerPoint. Thanks.
I'll let her.
All right. Is that the Zoom drive?
not. I'm not sure.
Oh, we've got IT on the way.
Thanks, IT. If not, you're gonna see my son's football highlights. He'll get his 15 minutes of fame. I'm all excited.
That'd be cool.
So it is
Yeah.
the PowerPoint there. in the
This one
middle.
here?
Mhm. All right, thank you. All right, I know most of you know me. I've worked for the district for 11 years as a first grade teacher. I'm also a mom, and I lost my son to suicide September 12th of 22. I'm here on behalf of Zero Suicides of Elko County. There will be 4 of us presenting tonight. We know you are developing the policy for suicide, and we wanted to come alongside you. So I'm going to start with some suicide statistics. So suicide is the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24. Every day, approximately 132 Americans die by suicide. Each day in our nation, there are an average of 5,400 attempts by young people, grades 7 through 12. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, and chronic lung disease combined. 54% of Americans have been affected by suicide in some way. And there's a bar graph down there showing you the percentage of middle school youth who seriously think about taking their lives. Here are some local statistics. Zero Suicides tracks. We had a really great dispatcher who left us in 2019. That blurb on the bottom there says in 2018, we had taken 21 calls for service where people died from suicide. This does not include those that were transported to the hospital and later died. They are calls of death by suicide. We had 225 calls where people threatened suicide and 218 calls for service where the person had attempted suicide. Already for the first 2 months of 2019, we have received 47 calls of suicide threats, 22 suicide attempts, and 4 deaths by suicide, with an estimated 2019 population of 52,649, including Wendover. These numbers are disturbing. And I didn't put the 23 stats up there, but we're up to eight suicides this year since January. Risk factors for suicide: depression, low self-esteem, mental illness, substance abuse or dependence, eating disorders, self-mutilation, prior suicide attempt, situational crisis. Athletes may be at risk due to injuries, intense pressure, success, and failure mindset. I wanted to really dig deep and think of how I could come and help you guys. After educating myself, I wish I had taken Skylar Basania's class prior to losing my son, because there were some things in there that maybe I could have recognized. So I'm really hoping that we can educate all teachers, because I didn't have that background knowledge. So this is called, I titled it Building Hope After Suicide from a Mother's Perspective. Suicide is the most tragic and devastating outcomes of mental health issues, and it can leave mourners feeling hopeless and helpless. Suicide is a serious problem that affects individuals of all ages, but it's especially concerning among school-age children and young adults. And I cannot tell you the amount of kids that have come to me since Kate has passed, and not kids that we would consider high risk either. With the right resources and education on suicide prevention, it is possible to identify and address warning signs in students who may be at risk. Suicide prevention, education, and resources should be designed to help parents and teachers recognize the signs of suicide risk and take appropriate action. This should include conversations about the importance of seeking mental health support services without stigma or shame. By breaking down the barriers that prevent people from seeking help, students who may be struggling with mental health issues can receive the support they need. The message needs to be clear to all district personnel that mental health is a serious issue and should be taken seriously. educators, support staff, secretaries, administrators, custodians, lunch helpers, bus drivers, anyone who has contact with students must be trained to recognize the warning signs of suicide risk and take action when necessary. School personnel are in a unique position to identify and reach out to students who may be at risk for suicide, and they should be provided with some education and resources they need to do, or I'm sorry, they should be provided with the education and resources they need to do so. Prevention is critical in reducing suicide. Educating students and parents about suicide prevention, training school personnel, identifying and helping students at risk, and responding after a suicide death are all critical steps in preventing suicide. By speaking openly about suicide and providing resources and education that promote understanding and hope, we can help prevent suicide. Training school personnel is a crucial step in preventing suicide among students. Educators are often on the first line of defense in recognizing and responding to mental health concerns in children and young people. By providing sufficient training, school personnel can better identify students at risk of suicide and provide them with the support needed to prevent suicide attempts. It is essential that educators and all other district personnel are trained to recognize the signs of depression and other mental health issues in students. Symptoms such as withdrawal, changes in behavior or academic performance, and thoughts of suicide can be indicative of underlying mental health problems. With the right training, school personnel can identify these warning signs early on and take action before it's too late. Proactive and compassionate engagement between school district adults and students can build relationships of trust and care, which can be particularly helpful for students experiencing stress or anxiety. With the right professional support, children and young people who are vulnerable can find the hope they need to keep going. To ensure that parents and students are educated about suicide prevention, school personnel can provide workshops and seminars that are accessible and informative. And we're trying to do that. And thank you, Susan, for coming to all of ours. I just want to give you a shout out. We recognize you and we appreciate you. Through these initiatives, school personnel can offer support to parents and students dealing with grief and trauma. Training school district personnel to recognize and respond to mental health concerns and providing support to students who may need it are instrumental in preventing suicide and building hope for grieving parents and students. By working together, district employees, educators, parents, and students can create a supportive community that encourages individuals to seek help when they need it. Initiating a conversation about suicide prevention. Initiating an open conversation about suicide prevention can be a powerful tool in breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health. In doing so, students may feel more comfortable discussing their struggles and seeking help. It is essential to approach the topic of suicide prevention with nuance, particularly with regard to cultural differences. Sensitivity and empathy are crucial as students from diverse backgrounds may have varying perspectives on mental wellness and mental health support services. An emphasis on the importance of seeking help and receiving proper support must undergo any discussion. It is necessary to include members of school district personnel in these conversations. Training them to formally identify and help students who are at risk of suicide can be beneficial to both student and the school community. School leaders must also encourage parents to become involved in the prevention of suicide. Educating them on the warning signs of suicidal thoughts and the importance of seeking professional help immediately can avert a potential crisis. Initiating a conversation about suicide prevention is a proactive approach to preventing suicide. By educating and training school district personnel, identifying at-risk students, and involving parents in these efforts, schools can create a culture of care and prioritize mental health and well-being. The continued development of these initiatives will provide hope to grieving parents, give school districts the tools necessary for suicide prevention, and promote positive mental health amongst students and their communities. Responding to a suicide death. Responding to a suicide death with a school community requires sensitivity and care. Adequate and timely support services and counseling should be provided to grieving parents and students through social workers, mental health counselors, and mental health coordinators. It is essential to recognize that responding to a suicide death is multifaceted and requires collaboration between district personnel, educators, parents, and mental health professionals. Firstly, school district personnel should be trained yearly on how to respond to a suicide death and identify the warning signs of suicide. This training needs to be in person, these workshops for school personnel, so they can enhance their response to a suicide death and strengthen their ability to assist at-risk students. Secondly, it is vital to connect grieving parents and students to mental health professionals to help them cope with loss. This includes providing hope after suicide for grieving parents through specialized counseling services that meet their mental and emotional needs. Moreover, schools should provide a written protocol, which is what you're doing, for responding to a death within the school community. The protocol should outline procedures for notifying staff, students, and families of the student's death, and offer recommendations for providing support services to those affected by the death. These protocols should also detail policies on confidentiality, media response, and relevant suicide prevention interventions. In conclusion, responding to a suicide death requires thoughtfulness, community, and school district expertise, and appropriate ongoing training. It is vital to provide the necessary support services and counseling to grieving parents and students to ensure that they have hope after suicide. Implementing procedures and processes tailored to our local communities needs in order to respond to suicide deaths within the school community can help with the healing process and provide a sense of safety for all students. Providing hope after suicide is an important step towards preventing its occurrence in the future. Grief after suicide can be overwhelming, and parents and students need all the help they can get to cope with the loss. Ongoing counseling services and support groups are essential in ensuring that they can work through their emotions and find the strength to carry on. School districts should partner with local mental health organizations to provide culturally sensitive mental health services to family members affected by suicide. This would enable them to access professional help in dealing with the emotions and trauma that come with a loved one's suicide. Beyond therapy, providing hope after suicide requires open communication and understanding from the community as a whole. Suicide prevention education should be integrated into our school curriculums and be made mandatory for all students and teachers. This can help break the stigma surrounding suicide, encourage individuals to seek help when needed, and ultimately save lives. I feel so passionately about making sure that this is addressed that I am offering to take my personal time to work alongside of each one of you to assist you in developing this very important policy. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wendy Charlebois, and I just want to say that I agree with every single word that Lori Lesbo just said, and she said it beautifully. And I'm going to say a lot of the same things, only from a different perspective. I'm a social worker, and as a social worker, I have trained soldiers on the dynamics of child and spouse abuse. I have worked with foster children and foster families, and I have worked with families of all kinds. And I've also been a teacher of social work, an instructor of social work at Great Basin College and the University of Nevada, Reno. I retired from the state in 2016 after working at DCFS, early intervention, and then for the last 11 years of my career at Great Basin College teaching social work. I continue to teach part-time for UNR, and I teach an internship seminar for the university. Also, unfortunately, I lost my son to suicide in 2018. So I totally concur with what Lori said. I'm here tonight to encourage and support the efforts of the school district, Zero Suicide, Elko County, and mental health providers as they adapt the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention's guidelines to fit our unique needs in Elko County. I'm also here to let you know that some of us who sit on the board of Zero Suicide, who have lost children to suicide, would like to offer our time and our experience to help refine the most important policy in our school district. Our students, teachers, and other school staff need a suicide prevention policy. They deserve a succinct and rational step-by-step approach. That's the bottom line. We have to have it. A policy like this will assure parents and our community that we have guidelines to follow if their children find themselves in a crisis. A good policy, as Lori stated, really begins with education and training. Education helps reduce the stigma of mental health challenges and encourages help-seeking behaviors. If our students know that we can talk about this, they're more apt to come to us when they are feeling scared, when they're feeling depressed, when they're feeling suicidal. Education inspires everyone to view suicide as the serious tragedy that it is, and it reduces sarcasm, jokes about suicide, and bullying. In my opinion, everyone involved with children, as Lori said, everyone involved with students need to be trained about suicide, from the suicide prevention coordinator, which in my opinion should be a mental health professional hired by the school district. This is a big job to help develop this policy and to implement this policy and to follow through on threats of suicide. That's a big job. It's a full-time job. We need someone who's passionate about that kind of work and finds a lot of satisfaction in doing that kind of work. This has to be a priority. This training, that's the beginning of what we need to do here in this school district, in my opinion. There are resources that can provide all kinds of training in this community for all of us. And there are going to be even more resources. And in fact, the Nevada Office of Suicide Prevention can provide lots of resources for our community, and it has already. A good policy prevents primary prevention activities. And we have done, the Elko high schools have done a great job this past semester in doing just that, primary prevention. The successful mental health weeks that they've put on, the Hope Squad that we hope will get going here pretty soon. And the Hope Squad, for those of you who don't know, they use peers and peer advisors who have been trained in the Hope Squad principles to help students who are struggling. We have had student participation in health fairs throughout our community. Those are all primary prevention activities that can help reduce stress and teach students and staff, because staff need to know about these things as well, to teach them about how to relieve stress and get the help that they need. A good policy promotes evidence-based intervention and collaboration with mental health providers. And I think we have such a great agency. Our youth mobile crisis unit is something that has just started in the last couple of years that can respond to youth crises in a very timely manner. And I think that's we really need to think about using them as much as we can from this when the school has a child that may be struggling and or is suicidal. And we need people, our policy needs to be really clear about who does what, when they do it, and how they do it. That has to be so clear, because we don't want kids to fall through the cracks. We don't want a teacher to say, oh, this student came to me and said that they didn't want to live anymore, and I didn't know who to call. We don't want that to ever happen. because that's when things can start spiraling in the wrong direction. And so the school needs to know the resources. And believe me, there are multiple lists of resources in this community. If you don't have one, we can find you one because there's a lot of them. And a good policy uses an evidence-based assessment. And I watched the last school board meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about the Columbia. Well, that's only one assessment, and I don't think the school district has, correct me if I'm wrong, has chosen the kind of assessment that they want to use. But I just want to let you know that the hospital uses the Columbia, and also rural clinics, mental health clinics uses the Columbia, and then they have a kind of an upgraded version of it as well. I have a handout for you that gives some quotes from a scholarly article about the Columbia, and I have a 17-page article if you want to read it. I'll leave it with you if you want to read it. But it is we have our resources. We just need to, kind of pull them all together. And I just want to say that Zero Suicide, as Lori said, we want to work alongside you in developing this policy. And a good policy also provides for postvention, which includes grief assistance and reducing risk of suicide contagion. And there's lots of information out there about this. But I think we owe it to our children to create a healthy suicide prevention policy. And there are wonderful people here in this room, in this community, that can really help dig deep and get that policy down. And I appreciate all of your work in doing this so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carol Farrell, and I'm on the board of Zero Suicide, and I am the grief educator, and I'm the grief support person. I'd like to take this time to thank you for the opportunity to present to you something that I feel is an important topic for discussion. First of all, I'm a master certified health and wellness coach. I'm a certified grief educator and a certified grief movement guide. I'm also a mom and a survivor of suicide loss to losing my son, my only child. It was this tragic and traumatic loss of my son that sent my world into complete chaos and led me down the path of grief education and my survival. We live in a world that puts a hush on death and also the death of a suicide. We live in a grief illiterate world. I have experienced many losses in my life: jobs, sudden death, disease, and most recently, the death of my only child. All these losses carry their own unique grief. Understanding grief in general, impact is vital to sustain mental health, and furthermore, understanding suicide grief is even more important because of its complexities. The death often shapes the grief. A suicide death leaves a family and a community grappling with complex and turbulent emotions. These may include shock, disbelief, guilt, fear, blame, anger, and also suicide ideation. Because this type of loss can be so unbearable to deal with and process, that those affected may feel hopeless in finding their way through this grief. Having a suicide prevention policy in place benefits everyone: student, families, and communities. Children are often the forgotten grievers. Our brains don't fully develop emotionally until the age of 26. Therefore, high school, middle school students and below are more susceptible to struggling with grief and processing the emotions that come with loss, especially a suicide loss, even more so than adults. Children don't have the life experiences or the capabilities to articulate emotions, to grieve a death, on top of that, understanding a suicide death. Grief is a normal human condition. Educating youth and those around us is vital if we are to dismantle the antiquated belief that we should hide or stuff our grief. Having a support system in place can also serve the students and faculty. By showing our vulnerability to this emotion, which is normal, a normal response to loss, we can begin to normalize the feelings that come from grieving. We must feel it to heal it. If we don't grieve, it will come from some form, whether disease, addiction, or some other form of unhealthy behavior. This is being discovered more and more as research continues on the effects of stress on our bodies. We all need the support and love of family, friends, and community, and/or a support group. We may not have a direct relationship with the person who died, but its aftermath affects the whole community. It does have a ripple effect. According to recent research, suicide is a tragic death due to a mental illness, no different than cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. I have a quote I'd like to share from you from Dr. Alan Wolfeld, PhD. Integration of grief takes time, and it's not something you find, it finds you. A loss by suicide complicates this integration because suicide is a traumatic event. And grief is not something we get over. It's a human condition, and we learn to carry it differently. Grief doesn't require a lot of time, but it requires dedicated time. According to grief expert David Kessler and many other professionals, the grief timeline is as follows. Acute grief is right now when it just happens. Early grief is the first 2 years. Mature grief is the rest of our lives. Grief is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not linear, and the impact of grief from suicide is even more complicated. Grief is what we feel on the inside. Mourning is what you see on the outside. We may seem okay, and we may say we are fine, but we're grieving our loss. Here in the Western world, we are given 5 days of bereavement from our jobs, and society tells us to move on. It's time to get over it. It's been 6 months, a year. My question to all of you, how long will you love the person you lost? So how do we support those who are grieving? What do they need? Listen. Your physical presence and the desire to listen without judging. Don't worry about what you will say, just being there with a listening ear. Have compassion, giving the person permission to express their feelings without fear of criticism or judgment. Have no expectations. Be there. Ongoing and reliable presence is the most important gift you can give a person. Well, you cannot take the pain away, nor should you try. You can help just by being there for the griever. And one last thing I would like to mention is to remain available for weeks, months, even years after the loss. They need to tell their story over and over and over. One factoid that I would like to mention specifically is that mental health professionals long ago compared the stress of living with a suicide loss to that stress of a Holocaust survivor. Suicide is not a selfish act. Suicide is an illness of the mind, and the research is backing that up. People who die by suicide, they have fallen into a state of such despair that they are not capable of rational choice as we regularly define it. Having a policy in place to be able To identify students and faculty who may be struggling is the beginning of prevention. As we talk more about mental health and normalizing our struggles, we begin to make a difference in the world and our community. Thank you. I do have a few, thank you. I do have some handouts here that I'd like to share with you. One is called The Mourner's Bill of Rights by Dr. Alan Wolfelt, How to Be with People in Grief, and Your Mind on Grief.
Good evening. My name is Christina Beyer, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical professional counselor with LifeQuest Behavioral Health, Elko. And I am honored to be asked by Zero Suicide to speak today. I have had the humbling privilege of, within the last year, the honor of walking with several families through the process of overcoming suicide. It has been a tremendous honor, as well as, to be quite honest, can be even a burden for those who walk with them. And so for our teachers and our educators, it's even more important that we provide them the education and support that they need to be those first lines of defense for the families and the survivors left behind from suicide. The first thing I want to say is that I would like suicide to no longer be a dirty word. I would like suicide to be spoken of with respect and honor, but more importantly, with diligence. I don't know if there's anyone in this room who is not in some way, even if it's just through hearing about the pain of the families in our community, have been touched by suicide. I want to speak to one specific issue because I could speak probably for days upon the importance of suicide prevention, mental health stigma, suicide postvention, but I really want to speak about suicide contagion. There's kind of a bit of a misunderstanding about what suicide contagion is. Suicide contagion is not when you speak it, it happens. Boys are more likely to participate in what is called a suicide cluster if one of their peers has completed suicide. Girls are more likely to participate in a suicide cluster if one of their friends has attempted and survived. The important time window that we have is 7 to 10 days. We have 7 to 10 days to address a completed suicide, to educate our student body, to offer support, to offer mental health resources, to reach out to the families and to the educators. 7 to 10 days, if we act responsibly within that time frame, we can prevent a suicide contagion cluster. What precipitates a suicide contagion cluster is not necessarily the suicide itself. It is the lack of united response from the community surrounding our young people. We need to give them opportunity to grieve. They need to grieve out loud. Memorials to suicide do not increase suicide contagion. What does, however, is a lack of response, whispers, rumor, innuendo, and shame. Shame has no effective use other than to increase the likelihood of a suicide cluster from happening. What we need to do is let students grieve out loud. Let them reach out to their favorite teacher. Teachers be put on
on notice that there are going to be students that have a spontaneous eruption of emotion, both joy and grief. Grief is far more than just our 5 stages. Grief happens in spurts and it happens without warning. We need to give our student bodies the opportunity to discuss it, to destigmatize it, to be open, not sensationalizing, but understanding. And understanding that these students, as my previous speaker said, are not quite emotionally capable to grieve in any type of predictable way. They need help. They need help in understanding that grief does not have a prescription, that it does not look the same for everyone, that just because you do not have emotion about it does not mean it's not there, or just because you are overwhelmed by emotion does not mean that you're grieving in a bad way. Memorials. If students want to set up a memorial for a student who has completed suicide, please, by all means, let them. This is the way that they need to understand their loss. Suicide contagion is more likely to happen if it is not addressed and if it is not spoken out loud. Let's destigmatize suicide. Suicide is not a dirty word. Suicide is an unfortunate reality of the world in which we live and an unfortunate reality of poor mental health. I specialize in crisis intervention and post-traumatic stress, as well as grief and loss. And in that specialty, I have an analogy that I would like to share with you today about what suicide is. And so I'm going to ask you to listen to 2 things, and please understand from my experience, this is the one truth for the survivors of suicide to understand the best. First and foremost, suicide, in my opinion, is the truest form of temporary insanity. We know that if intervention happens, if that person has someone to go to and they feel comfortable speaking, that just talking with them in that moment can prevent a suicide. Unfortunately, most completed suicides are from those who have not expressed their distress whatsoever. So we really need that suicide prevention education so that our students, our faculty, and our families know what to look for. Secondly, I'd like you for a moment to imagine the worst mistake that you have ever made. The worst mistake in your life that you can think of in your mind right now. And then I'd like you to imagine that that was the last mistake you've ever made, and that that mistake was sensationalized all over the place in which you live. That is the reality of suicide. Suicide is the worst mistake this person has ever made, the one that they can't take back. By calling it selfish, by ignoring a child when they say, I don't want to live, by pushing aside suicide because it feels uncomfortable, we are increasing the likelihood that suicide contagion will happen in where we live. We must be brave, we must be courageous, and we must encourage our faculty and young people to do so as well. I would like to thank you for your time this evening. Please know that there are so many amazing mental health professionals in this community that would love in any way to help with crafting any type of procedural guidelines for the faculties and teachers of our county so that we can present a united front on behalf of the kids that may be suffering. Thank you again for your time.
All right, I will just start by saying thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for the information. Thank you for offering. Okay, we've got one more. Well, come on out. I'll still finish. Thank you for offering your assistance because this is an incredibly important policy and we recognize that. And you'll notice it's not on our agenda tonight because we definitely want to make sure we reach out, and we appreciate you reaching out to us to offer your assistance. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for letting all of us come and talk to you about something that's important topic, and that's suicide prevention. I'm going to be honest with you though. I've done many presentations and this one's really hard because you guys have the power. And this has been a long time coming. It's been like 15 years that I've been trying to get something going. And I'm glad that we're here finally talking about it. I do want to recognize though Susan Neal for coming to our school events that we have in our county, because every event I've been to, she's been there. My name is Lynette Vega, and I'm standing in front of you as a mother, a grandmother, a retired teacher, an advocate for mental wellness, and an advocate for suicide prevention. And I'm also a survivor of suicide loss. 15 years ago, my beautiful daughter, Rochelle Marie Sloan, died by suicide at the age of 23 while she was in the Air Force. She attended Mountain View, Elko Junior High, and Elko High School. Rochelle was a scholarly student and a scholarly airman. During her school years, sadly, there were classmates of hers that died by suicide. One year, it was either 2006 or 2007, there was like 6 students that died at Spring Creek High School, 6. Why didn't the school district do something then? Why? I don't know. As a mother and a teacher at the time, I remember feeling for those families. I remember our community grieved for those kids. And as Carol stated, a suicide death leaves a family and a community grappling with complex and turbulent emotions. But I'm here to tell you not to make the same mistake I did. I did not learn about the signs of suicide until after my daughter died by suicide. I do remember in 2007, when I was starting my school year at Mountain View, we as teachers had a 1-hour training of what to say to someone that might be suicidal. From that short training, I was able to ask Rochelle if she was thinking about dying by suicide because she was struggling with her mental health in the Air Force when she returned from Iraq. She did a tour there. She said yes, that she was thinking about suicide. I asked her. Then I asked her if she had a plan, and she said yes. I asked her what her plan was. She told me her plan. I don't know what to say after that. I wasn't trained in that. So I asked her if she was seeing the Air Force doctors, and she said she was. And I didn't know what else to ask. The year Rochelle died in 2008, the Elko paper wrote a 2-page front article about her, and it came out in August. In September, I was talking with my 6th grade students at Flatview about Rachel's challenge to start a chain reaction of kindness. She was one of the students that was killed at the Columbine shooting on April 20th, 1999. One of my students in the class raised his hand and asked if someone died by suicide. If someone had died by suicide. I said, no, she helped someone not die by suicide. The next day I was called into the principal's office because a parent called and wanted to know why the word suicide was brought up. So I went down to the principal's office and told them why. And they said, okay, they just had to check because a parent was concerned. But as I was walking back down the hallway, I was thinking, we cannot talk to our kids about suicide prevention. This is insane because there's teachers with magnets on their doors that say breast cancer awareness. There's 6th grade boys wearing I love booby bracelets, and they're not being called down to the principal's office for breast and boobies. So I thought, I'm going to take all the training I can get and put my stickers on the doors and get students to ask me what those stickers are for. So I did. I took Safe Talk training. I took assist training. I put my stickers on the door, and I started having kids asking me what those stickers were for. And I told them what it meant, and then opened up that dialogue, just like everyone has mentioned that has spoke before me. It opens the dialogue. We have to talk about this. We can't keep putting shame on it. We can't. After I took that training, I knew what I could have and should have said to my daughter that was 2,388 miles away. I mentioned this story to you because don't think for a minute it can't happen to your family. And I pray it doesn't. Suicide does not know race, age, or economics. When we started keeping track of the calls that came through dispatch in 2018, as young as 6 years old wanted to die by suicide. There's not one single family here that we can hang a sign up on the front of their house that says no problems here. Every one of us is dealing with something. Suicide awareness does not cause a suicide. Research has told us asking someone if they are thinking about dying by suicide lowers the risk of suicide. You are not planting the idea in their head. They are already thinking about it. When you ask, they are relieved that finally someone noticed. About 9 years ago, I spoke with Jack French to have everyone trained in Safe Talk. It says suicide alertness for everyone in the district. We were able to get quite a few employees trained during that time. A principal I was working with at the time told me the next day that he was glad that he took that training because he had a 5th grader and his father come into his office wanting to die by suicide. He said he had no idea what to say to that student and father up until he took that class, that training. And that training is only 3.5 hours. And I'm bringing that up also because I'm not getting a definite answer of when we can do it again this year. It can be done on one of the teacher work days in August, or it can be done on one of the Fridays that's scheduled for PD. It's only 3.5 hours. When I say all employees, I'm saying everyone that works with kids. Just as Lori said, all school personnel, meaning bus drivers, kitchen help, everyone. An hour training is not sufficient. It only touches the surface. During Safe Talk training, you have the chance to role play. And as if you're talking to a suicidal person, you learn what to say and what not to say. The science behind role playing helps take away the fear of asking someone if they're wanting to die by suicide, because that's a scary thing to have to ask someone. So if you get that chance to role play it, it kind of lessens that fear. It also engages the learner to develop life-saving techniques. Are there any board members here that have taken the Safe Talk training that would like to talk a little bit about that? Do you want to say anything about it, or?
First, I could take it again.
Yeah.
Because honestly, you forget things.
Yeah.
I didn't not enjoy. The role playing was helpful because I was having a hard time just coming up with the words, because I just felt like, what should I say? Am I saying the wrong word? So for me, that was really helpful.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm happy, though, to finally see the Hope Squad brought to Elko County Schools for middle school and high school. Dr. Greg Hundle, founder of the Hope Squad, said the high school they started Hope Squad at has not had a suicide in 16 years, and that was in 2020. So I'm looking forward to the day that we can say that. Hope Squad also, though, needs to be brought into the elementary schools. Research is telling us that age 10 is now the new 16. Childhood is getting shorter compared to 10 to 15 years ago. I know there are elementary kids that are talking about and wanting to die by suicide. I know that for a fact. They need to develop the skills to work through life problems. They need to know where to go to get help. And Hope Squad helps develop those skills. The district needs to find funding for this program to help our kids. We need to start young, so as they get older, they'll have the skill set and they'll be able to work through life's problems. They need to know it's okay to not be okay and reach out for help. Every young person that takes their life, there are 150 to 200 that attempt. I know the counselors need training in assessing a student for suicide and what the next step would be for the child if they are suicidal. And that is something that needs to be discussed for sure. As leaders of our school district, though, language does matter, and I do have a handout I'm going to share with you when talking about suicide. And I would also like to volunteer to help with the process of writing the school policy for suicide prevention and mental wellness, because for the last 15 years, I have read and studied about suicide prevention and mental wellness. I also have attended conferences. I'm accredited in school suicide prevention through American Association of Suicidology, and I've done lots of trainings. I'm a board member for NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and I'm the founder for Zero Suicides Elko County. And I work with their state representatives about mental wellness and suicide prevention, and I continue to learn. Everyone here is invited to attend our monthly Zoom meetings that we have every second Thursday from 9 to 10. You will learn about resources in our area and mental wellness. And then we have many resources, just like Wendy said, and they even brought resource cards for you guys that we print and hand out to the schools and to counselors, and to everybody. Thank you again for letting us speak briefly about suicide awareness and mental illness. Are there any questions that you might have?
I would just add, and this goes not just for yourself, but for anybody, you've all volunteered to help with this policy going forward. Well, it's listed on our last agenda. It's out there in black and white and paper. I'd love for you to go through, evaluate it. Let us know if we're deficient in something or if something's good, or, because that's something we're going to be looking at probably in the next meeting. So I'm telling the verbiage is already out there. I'd love your input on that. If you can, of course, get to me through my email address is listed there on the page on the district website, or jdurham@ECSD NB.net, or and you can get to the agenda through board docs to be able to see that policy as we're looking at it. I wasn't at the last meeting. I apologize for that, but I did listen to the complete meeting and go through. There was a lot of discussion on this particular policy that we're looking at. So taking all that into account, if you weren't there or didn't see that, that might be something you want to look at to see kind of where everybody's head's at. But if you guys could look at that, please, and then send some input, I'd be happy to look at it so that we can get that in.
Yeah, I did read it.
So
Yeah, I read it, and it's a model policy, and the school district definitely needs to write their own. It gives you ideas of what to, how to go about it. But do you guys have like a meeting time, or?
We're having it right now.
Well, I mean, when you do the policy.
No, that's
No.
what we're having
Okay.
right now. Yeah, there isn't an additional.
There isn't?
So
Okay.
Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, so any deliberating about the policy has to happen in open meeting. But as far as since our last meeting, we've already taken, so there were several suggestions and thoughts from board members about that policy, the model one. And so about a week ago, I met with 3 other licensed social workers who have some expertise in this area, and asked for their input on some of those suggestions, and other areas, just asked them to look through the policy as a whole, and other areas that they might have recommendations for. And so the original plan was to have it on tonight's agenda. And after seeing how many kind of thoughts there were with that, I said, let's push it off till our July meeting, so we can continue to gather input and make those revisions.
That.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I love that you're offering those suggestions to the board. I would, a good board member knows that when something is given to them, they send it right to the superintendent. So I would just invite you to bypass that step if you'd like to. And as I'm collecting, I mean, it's fine, you can send it to him as well. But and any revisions that are going to be made for the policy, assuming we're able to put that revision in for the July 18th meeting, I think it's July 18th. I would be responsible for putting all those revisions together and presenting it in that fashion. So yeah, that's my invitation to everyone who talked tonight. And then a lot of what you said is already in there, or was part of our conversation from last Tuesday. It's tough to like you said, there's a lot of different people who are willing to and maybe have access to those resources. I'm not saying I don't want more input. I certainly don't want, I don't want to get a room with 25 people either, because that gets pretty, it kind of can start to convolute the issue. So, but given that you've come here and you've expressed your opinions, I invite you to, we could even sit down, the group of you and me, and just I can hear what your thoughts are on that. So
I'd appreciate
Yeah.
that.
yeah,
Thank
please,
you.
please reach out, set up an appointment, and be happy to listen.
Okay, I'll do
Yep.
that. Thank you. And I'll give you the language.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Is there any way that tonight we could get a commitment for a safe talk training for the school district before the next semester starts?
That would be an action, which would have to be an agendized item. So no, we cannot make a commitment to anything tonight. However, I will say that in our conversation about which, about the training element of the policy, Safe Talk was mentioned as one of the kind of premier options, I guess I should say, one of the preferable options. So that's very much at the forefront of our minds. I'll let you know that at least. I guess I would be the person to talk to about that. Yeah, I'm not sure it would exactly work the way you're saying, but I would be the person to come to for that. Yeah. Yep.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
I've got lots of thoughts spinning. I respect that you ladies are here tonight. Thank you very much. And to this last point, I want us to be cautious about the board making action or taking action on individual trainings that are required. Because pretty soon, everyone that has a topic that's important to them will be requesting the board to have that training. This is not to say that the Safe Talk training is not important. What I am saying, though, is that some folks have other levels of importance for other items. And if we start dictating to the superintendent, who's the only employee that we have control over, as to what those trainings must be, it can quickly spiral out of control. So I'm not saying that I'm not going to listen with an open ear. I'm just saying that I'm cautioning the board on taking an action in which we're going to continue to evaluate each training individually. So that's all I want to say on that. I also appreciate the opportunity to have one-on-one training, one-on-one discussions. And I mean no disrespect. Bluntly, you have more experience than you're going to be able to convey to me, period. As a group, it would probably be more productive if you could get together and, as Mr. Durham said, take the document, redline the document, and explain what those changes are. Again, I mean this no disrespectfully or without disrespect, but if the next meeting has more than an hour of discussion before the board starts to deliberate on the policy, we are going to lose effectiveness. That's just the way it's going to be. I'm sorry, I just know how boards operate. You're going to lose part of us. You guys having the ability to deliberate and to make those changes in a non-open meeting forum is so much more productive than us having to deliberate that then. Because one-on-one, yes, you can talk to us, but if we start hearing what's happening with other board members, we have to stop the conversation. We cannot continue that. It would be ineffective and inefficient. So I'm not saying you can't approach us, and I'm not saying I'm not welcome to having the discussion, from an efficiency and effectiveness standpoint, I would suggest that whoever is interested in making these changes, please take the time, go through, redline the policy, and then allow it to come back through Mr. Anderson so that the board can see it. We have time to start to digest it, and then we can inform our decisions a little bit better. Because I don't know, here, I know that my mother's family looks at suicide as normal, and that every one of my mother's siblings and that my mother herself has either attempted or succeeded in suicide, that my grandfather suicided, that my great-grandfather suicided. For them, it's normal. I know that, so that impacts my ability to be able to address this in a manner as well. But if you can get it to Mr. Anderson, if we understand where you're coming from, because you have that experience, I think that would be the most effective way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the board? Questions? Go ahead, Brooke. Go.
I would just like to thank everybody for coming. I'm emotional when the grade schoolers come in here and sing in their choir. I want to cry. So I just want to thank everybody for coming in, seeing your pins on your shirts, and you guys just putting your heart on your sleeve and telling us and trying to educate us on suicide. I know it's such an important issue, and we have to do better for our children. So I just want to say thank you for that. I would appreciate if you guys got together and redlined the policy that is in the board docs. And then I would love, before you leave, if I could get all of your contact information so that when I see something from you, that if I have questions or want to discuss things with any of you, that I know how to get a hold of you and talk to you about those things. And again, just appreciate you all so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for sharing your stories with us too, because I know, I don't know, but it must be hard to do that. So I appreciate you. I don't understand, why do we have to have the policy ready for next time? Is this something that has to be done by July? Like, why can't it? Or is
It does not have to be done by next time, but that is where we would probably put it on the agenda. So please, as several board members have said, please look at the policy, redline it, get it to Mr. Anderson, make a meeting or set up a meeting with him and share your expertise. We want everyone in this community to have an opportunity who has experienced suicide in any manner. If they would like to share their thoughts, their expertise, please reach out to Ms. Anderson and share that with us. This policy is, I've already stated, is incredibly important. I think most of us up here, if not all, have been touched by suicide in some way. And we need to do better. The Hope Squad is one of the things I worked fairly diligently to get started here, because I have definitely been touched by suicide in several different cases, and I know we can do better. So please reach out to Mr. Anderson. Thank you for sharing tonight. Thank you for the information, and thank you for taking care of our community in such an important way. All right, any other comments before we move on? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item 1.8, input from the public. This is a period devoted to comments, excuse me, by the general public, if any. In the interest of privacy and due process, the public is requested to not raise personnel issues except in a legally noticed closed personnel session of the board. Comments are limited to 3 consecutive minutes. A speaker's time may not be reserved, divided, apportioned, or deferred. No action may be taken upon a matter raised under this item of the agenda until the matter itself has been included specifically on an agenda as an item upon which action will be taken. I have one request from I apologize if I say this wrong, Maricela Elliott. Okay. All right, well, go ahead and come up and just kind of give us a brief, because you asked to come up and just share with us. And then if we have questions, we will probably email you afterward.
Yes, my name is Maricela Elliott, and I just relocated back to Elko. I'm a clinician in Colorado, and I provide telehealth services. So I just wanted to make sure that I was here and available to answer any questions. I have been a part of Zero Suicide since they started, and I unfortunately couldn't attend meetings during my time in Colorado, but I did listen to all the recordings. And I just wanted to put a name to a face. I am in this community. This is my home community, and I'm really looking forward to having what they presented, very clear in the policy for the school district.
All right, thank you, Maricela. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment at this time? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to item 2.1, receipt, review, and possible approval of resolutions to augment the budget of the general fund, special revenue funds, and capital project funds for the 22-23 school district budget for possible action.
Julie's going to be up here for a few minutes for the next handful of items, but I just want to thank her in advance for her hard work on the presentations and the many revisions that she has had to do recently. And so anyway, I'm not going to intro her for every single item. I'm going to intro her now. And yeah, thanks, Julie.
Okay. Okay, so the first one is, that's not right. We've already seen that one. So,
I think that's the same one, Julie.
yep. That's
We're looking for the June.
wrong one uploaded. I probably sent you the wrong one.
Let's see.
Let's see, 6 people can review it, but that doesn't mean I send the right one. It's a Word doc.
Julie, it appears that the one is accurate.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's got, okay. I did, let's just say June. Okay. I need to share again. Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. Try again. Okay, now that we fixed that, it should be June, not December. Our budget process, and I've tried to put this up every time we discuss budget, so you know where we are in the process. For this one, June 23, we're about to close out the fiscal year. And we have one last opportunity to augment the budget and avoid a violation. So an NRS violation is whenever a function in total exceeds budget. So a function is, examples are highlighted in green. Instruction, student support, instruction support. Our last budget for this year would have been in December. So we have one last chance to kind of reallocate expenses without changing any fund balance to more reflect where we actually needed them. And that's the Department of Taxation's last chance to avoid budget violations by function. I updated this historical comparison. We'll kind of go over it in the 24 slide too. Got a lot of budget today. I wanted to note that the FY24 budgeted expenditures does not contain union negotiated pay increases. The FY24 budget done in May 2023, the ending fund balance didn't allow, there wasn't enough to budget for that yet. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the FY24 budget amounts.
Julie, quick question. So this does not include the pay increase for like the administrators that is retroactive according to their, correct?
I tried to include some of that because that was negotiated in June and that would have been all paid out in June.
Okay.
So hopefully there's enough in there. Well, in 24. I'm gonna say hopefully just that's close, but they haven't negotiated for, did they negotiate for 24? No, so that isn't what's in 24.
Okay.
Hopefully that's accounted for in the June 30 ending fund balance, though, going into 24.
Thank you.
So I wanted to update this information so you have more informed information to make decisions. Did I skip one? Ending fund balance. We're going to kind of touch on that more when we get to the FY24 presentation, and we'll explain why it increased. And then part of my note in the handout that's on board docs is keep in mind that some of the expenses will need adjusted in the December augment as negotiations progress. Okay. So one of the changes for the general fund, we had people-centered funding plan, food service, and special education revenues. In the December augment, I had food service revenue in food service and SPED revenue in SPED. The state doesn't want it that way. They want it in the general fund and then transferred to those other funds. So you'll see that as we go through the next few slides. That's the reason for the large revisions in revenues. They aren't additional revenues, they're just moving from one fund to another. And then in the next slide, you'll see operating transfers. Most of the increase in funding goes to transfers out to funds the intended SPED and food service funds. And then this is a detail breakout of kind of the reallocations and expenditures based on what we've seen through the year instead of what we expected back in December. So regular programs, a lot of that was textbooks and student transportation. We had bus purchases this year, and just those supply costs have gone up a lot. And then it's a large document, so I wanted to pick out kind of the more important slides. So this transfer reconciliation kind of ties together the transfers that you see going out of the general fund and into the other 4 funds. So English learner, gifted and talented and at risk. Those are pupil-centered funding plan weighted funds. Those have been covered before, and now that it's funded differently and it requires its own fund, we're pulling those expenditures that the general fund used to cover and putting them in these funds to give a more accurate representation of the full cost of those programs to the state. And special education, that's a large transfer in, partially because like the 5 million we saw go into the general fund, that needs transferred back out to the sped fund. So they need to see that transfer every year in order to continue funding. That's kind of fast because I didn't want to go through a 90-page document, 1 page at a time. It's a yearly adjustment to reallocate by function. You cannot change ending fund balance. It has to be net adjustments without changing your ending balance. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
So Julie, if I understood correctly, you said the pupil-centered funding program, the state wants us leaving it with the general and then transferring it out end of year. If we take those 2 amounts off of the PDF page 2, would that mean that generally there was $900,000 that as a district we kind of shuffled? Because it seems like the 6.1, 6.2 from the pupil-centered funding program was forced on us. So
not really. So the funding to SPED, their intention for that was to cover what the district usually put in there every year. That's how they got the 5 million. Historically, the district has put 5 million in the general fund to supplement the federal funds to keep that program running. So it's
so how
more
about this, maybe
broken
asked
out.
a different way? If we had done it their way, we wouldn't see this as an augmentation, correct?
We would not, but that's also what delayed the 5 million in funding, was they didn't see the transfer out last year. So they said, oh, you must not need it. It's like, well, we used it. It was just in the SPED fund and not transferred out. So it was, according to the state, that funding used to be in the DSA per pupil funding. Now they broke it out and say it's no longer unrestricted. It is unrestricted, but it's intended to cover SPED. And if you don't use the whole thing, then your funding goes down next year. Does that make sense? It's not really, we're not losing or gaining. They say it's what we've put in there historically.
I'm with you. I think 95, maybe 99% of the county doesn't understand government accounting, and augmentation seems scary to them. What I was trying to say is that if the state hadn't forced the 6.2 million on us, in essence, we would only have a $900,000 augmentation, which makes it look a lot better and perhaps less scary. And I wanted to see if that thought process was accurate.
So now that I know how they want to see it, it won't be an adjustment next year because we'll do, it's right the first time in the 24 budget. Now that I know, don't put SPED money right in SPED.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. Because that makes a lot of sense to do it their way.
Other questions from the board? How would you like to proceed?
Well, yeah, I had one. I saw it change the agenda item in board docs at about 3:30 this afternoon, and I was just curious what that was.
Uploading the presentation.
Okay.
So the PDF resolutions didn't change.
Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything significant.
No, just making our presentation public.
Madam Chair, move to augment I'm just trying to make sure I get this language right. I apologize.
Approve the
Move
resolutions.
to approve the resolutions to augment the budget of the general fund, special revenue funds, and capital project funds for the 2022-2023 school district budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye, and that item is approved. Item 2.2 is receipt, review, and possible approval of the adjusted 23-24 final school district budget reflecting the Nevada legislature funding increases and related expenditures in accordance with NRS 354.598.
Okay.
All right, Julie.
So this is an adjustment that you don't see on our flow chart because this is only done in legislative years when they change our funding, which they did this year. So we had a budget in April. We had a budget forum and another budget due in May. And now within 30 days of legislation, we have another adjustment to reflect those changes.
Any questions from the board?
So, do you want to go through the whole thing or?
Well, yes, we can go through. I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions before we even start.
Okay.
How do
Carry
you
on.
tell the
Oh, go ahead.
state to elect legislators that are efficient with your time?
Well,
Sorry.
an extension would have been nice maybe on legislative years, but that's okay. We got it done. So Senate Bill 503 is what resulted in the changes we're going to see in the next slide. So June 1st is when the bill was signed. June 2nd is when NDE gave us updated funding for the next 2 years. And this is one of the rare instances we get to do an adjusted budget. So this page kind of ties together all the changes. So state funding in the general fund, you'll see on the far right, went up 11 million. English learner went down slightly. Gifted and talented went up about 4,000. And at risk went up, excuse me, about 400,000. And that's just zooming in because I know it can be hard to read.
It's not too bad.
Let's see. So then this is tying the expenditures. So the purpose of this revision was mostly to show the updated funding. Some of the expenditures, such as negotiations with the unions, we're going to make in the December augment. I wanted to show mostly the legislature information to give updated information for decisions going forward for those negotiations. I did make some changes to the expenses though. With an ending fund balance of $1 million in the May budget, I didn't have the wiggle room to really increase the site budgets. So I added 50,000 to the Part A site budgets. And then Part B is what really needed it most, the maintenance budget. So I added 200,000 of the site budgets for maintenance in the general fund. The English learner, gifted and talented and at risk, the expenses adjusted by the amount of the revenue adjustment. Those are special revenue funds, and usually you budget the full fund balance so it's available for spending on that program during that fiscal year. Okay, so we're gonna jump to the general fund. We added a column to reflect the legislature adjustments. So pupil-based funding increased. Let's see. And you'll see on the SPED where it was highlighted prior, they corrected it and now we have our 5 million in SPED funding back and it's in the general fund where they want it. I just wanted to highlight adding to the expenses for the Part A site budgets. And that's adding the 200,000 for the school maintenance budgets. And then this is a reconciliation between the May budget ending fund balance and the new legislature one. So that brings our ending fund balance up to just under 12 million. And that's about 1.2 months of operation, just to kind of put it in perspective. And that's not including the salary increases. Yeah, I just want to put that in there.
Julie, can I pause you there for just a moment?
Yeah.
What's the dollar amount threshold that we need to avoid for 3 continuous years of declining fund balance?
That's not really a dollar threshold. It's 3 years of decline. So we kind of need to see what this year will look like. And when we did 24, that looked like another year of decline, which we don't know yet until we get all our expenses in there, but the funding is definitely helping us catch up. In the 23 handout,
If I'm reading that right, on page 5 of the handout for 23, we right now are guesstimating 4.3 million, 4.4 million. So we want to make sure we don't go below whatever that number is when it's said and done. We can't go below that, correct?
yeah, we don't really want to go that.
And what
that
happens
low
if we
again.
do?
That's probably not even a month of payroll. So we're on the edge. if we
So
do
what
that.
happens if we have 3 years of decline? What does the state do?
3 years of decline is a corrective action plan to the state to say how you're going to fix it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I just highlighted the general. Oh, there you go.
So I have a question. You said that that was about a month and a half of expenditures that
Mhm.
we'd be left with. What ideally would you like to be left with?
I'd like to see us around 13-14%. Remember, the state sweeps at 16%, so we don't want to hit that, even though that's about 2 months of operations.
And what percent is this at then?
10.
10%. Okay.
And just warning, it's going to go down after we add of course, the COLAs and stuff. But it's still a lot better than our last May version.
Yes.
So the governor surprised us with some additional funding.
Let's just ask for those surprises to keep coming. Like,
Yes.
we would love some additional funding surprises. Just no more taking funding surprises. We want good surprises.
So that's all I had, unless you had questions on specific pages.
All right, questions from the board? All right, seeing none, how would you like to proceed?
Can you hear me? I move to approve the adjusted 2023-2024 final school district budget reflecting the Nevada legislature funding increases and related expenditures in accordance with NRS 354.598.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye and the motion carries. All right, item 2.3, receipt to review and possible approval of a resolution authorizing an interfund loan to the Adult Education Fund from the General Education Fund.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Mhm.
is there a reason we cannot combine these 3 into one action, or does the NRS require us to take each of these actions separately, Julie?
I think as long as your action's clear and I get signatures on all the resolutions, we should be good.
Is there any material difference between the 3 of these explanations?
No, the purpose between an interfund loan is a temporary. So these funds have receivables that are due, like the money's been spent and it's due from either the state or the feds to come in after June 30. So in the meantime, the district loans money so it doesn't have a negative cash balance in our financials. And that's the reason for all 3 of them.
Is there any risk of, or has there ever been an instance in which we did not receive the funds anticipated that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. We have grant agreements. It's, yeah.
Okay.
Just for a little context too, I looked back. This has been on every June agenda since as far back as I can see. So this is I know you all asked for what do we do every year kind of thing, and I'm working on that for you, but this is one of those things that happens every year.
Thank you. Madam Chair, move to approve a resolution authorizing an interfund loan to the Adult Education Fund from the General Fund to the State Grants Fund from the General Fund and to the federal funds from the General Fund.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, this will cover item 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye and the motion carries. Thank you for your efficiency. And Julie, thank you. All right, we'll move to item 2.6, receipt, review, and possible approval of request to conduct a surplus sale.
Madam Chair, move to approve the request to conduct a surplus sale using the documentation provided.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye and the motion carries. Item 2.7 is receipt, review, and possible approval of policy CH, administrative personnel, salary schedules, and annual leave for superintendent and district administrative personnel. This is for possible action.
Thanks. So just as a reminder, this was first reviewed last board meeting on the 13th, and the policy is as was presented. I think there was a slight adjustment. To make sure people knew what CNA meant, we detailed out what that stood for. And just as a reminder, I know there's a lot of red line. As the context was given 2 weeks ago, this is basically to reflect changes to the policy because the administrators union developed their own collective bargaining agreement. So those things were being removed, and then some language cleanup, and then a few changes to to ratios as we discussed last time. So if you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them. Cody is also here. He loves to answer questions too.
All right, any questions from the board on this one?
Madam Chair, if I may, CJ, the information that was pulled out because it's included in the CNA is similar in nature, just percentages that have been adjusted to reflect the agreement, correct?
Could you ask your question a different way?
Absolutely. So the amount the red lines of the enrollment tables that have been reduced or removed from this policy are almost identical to what was included in the CNA. However, percentages or the weighting, I guess, has changed.
The numbers have changed.
Okay. But otherwise it's still the same data.
The table is the similar fashion. Yeah, but some of those ratios went up as part of that bargaining agreement.
Okay.
But yes, it just no longer applies to this policy anymore. Is really more the relevant point is that this policy now is very strictly about district administrators as opposed to site administrators. So that's the main reason for taking it all out.
So I'm wondering then if we might want to change the title.
The title does read and district administrative personnel.
Yep.
So administrative personnel, salary schedules. Okay. And district administrative personnel.
So it's for me and district administrative personnel.
Yeah, so it does not include site administration.
Yeah.
Right, it is, and it's specifically, that's in the title.
Okay, here, sorry, Madam Chair,
Go
if I
ahead,
may.
please.
So I had what I was looking at to be an amendment before we allowed the red line to go through. And that's because the daily rate that's included within this policy isn't identified on this policy, but it is identified in the CNA. Though I do see Formula R rate 455.33, which is the rate as approved in the policy, in the CNA, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't going to be as efficient on this one and with time as I had on the others, so I apologize. I stand and I'm ready to make a motion if
Please
nobody
do.
else wants to do so, unless there's no other questions.
We can
Madam
always
Chair.
take questions after. So
Move to approve policy CH, administrative personnel salary schedules and annual leave for superintendent and district administrative personnel as presented.
Second.
thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. Chair votes aye and the motion carries. Item 2.8 is receipt, review, and possible approval of policy JCD, rights and responsibilities dress code.
Similarly, this was presented the last board meeting for first review. The only recommended change was where something said his in reference to a principal. That word was changed to their as to go with his or her, just one word. And so that change was made. I can't remember where that was. 1B. It's in the middle of paragraph 1B. So that change was made. Otherwise, it looks exactly as it did 2 weeks ago.
All right, any questions or discussion on this?
I do have one, and I apologize again for not being efficient. I'll try to make this quick. I did write my notes already. I believe in personal accountability and that graduates and their families are responsible for ensuring that the graduation ceremony is not marred by disappointment in this policy being enforced. However, because the discretion rests with the principal and there are changes in that position occasionally, which may make an adornment acceptable 1 year and not the next, I feel some type of reminder of this policy at graduation time would be the right thing to do. I just want to hear the board's thoughts on this. I don't have a motion. I don't have an amendment. I just want to know if maybe I'm the only one that's thinking this. I just would hate for a change that was allowed or for something that happened this year at, for example, only because Mr. Rickersham is no longer the principal at Elko High School. He allowed something and that would not be allowed next year. So I don't know how we tell our graduates, hey, this is on you. This is your responsibility. That's what accountability is. But you may want to not be faced with disappointment when you start walking down the pathway and somebody says that's not acceptable. So I don't know how we address that and if we even need to.
I would suggest that the appeal process
Yeah,
in this
the appeal
policy is
process.
very clear, and that it were allowed a year previous and not the next would be a very strong argument in that appeal.
I agree, but that's appeal process only happens after graduation. There is, if they're walking down the walk and they're saying, nope, you can't do that, because we won't know. I shouldn't say we, the administrator may not know what they're adorning with
You're saying if
until
there
the
was
day
no
of.
prior conversation, the kid just shows up on graduation day. You're right. Then a
Because
judgment call would have to
there's
be made
nothing
there.
saying
Yeah.
in here, you must approve it or get it approved in advance. That's my only concern.
Sure. And I can't
Sorry.
remember if we talked about this last time, but just as a reminder, like from a practical perspective, a high school administrator has a graduation like meeting with kids about what is allowed, what isn't allowed. Here's like that's an in practice at the school type thing. They probably won't say per policy JCD, but they will go through what those things are and let kids know about that. I mean, Paul can probably speak to, but he's nodding his head. That's what they do every year.
Both of my children have had that. So.
Yep.
And the kids show up, so.
Yeah.
Graduation, and they go through that. They're required. Graduation starts, everything. We had. And to get a little bit of chance, but they walk, we want to walk. So it's dealt with before we want to do.
Great. And that's all I wanted to make sure that we address. That two of mine that have graduated didn't really ever talk about what that was. And things have changed a little bit since I graduated. This wasn't really something we talked about. Okay, great. Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm happy to continue to keep this train rolling and move to approve policy JCD, rights and responsibilities, dress code.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Chair votes aye and the motion carries. Item 2.9 is receipt, review, and discussion of proposed changes to policy GBB21, outside employment, all employees.
Thanks.
Anderson.
Before I go into that one, I do, just because Jeff, you did point out that there was like a change to the agenda with the presentation before. 7 and 8 both had late changes, and that's because, yes, so 7 and 8 had late changes, and we noticed that those were Word documents that were editable, and so I deleted those and put PDF ones in there, just so you're aware that that's what those changes were for. 2.09 GBB 21. So as the background information states, we've just been inundated is not, that's dramatic, but we've been receiving multiple requests recently for other school districts and other school entities that are not part of districts, but other types who are experiencing the same issues that we are. As much as people want to say we're in a hiring crisis, everyone is in a hiring crisis. And so we have entities that are seeking the usage of be it our school psychs or any other kind of specialized position like that. And so kind of in the past, there's been a lot of, when those situations would occur, we'd create these MOUs, and it started to feel messy to us to do that way and to be the middleman in these types of arrangements. And so basically this lays out, the revisions to this lay out good practices for just setting that up so that other school districts aren't going through us to have our employees do work for them on their own time, because it's not our business what they do on their own time. Now you do have to ensure no conflict of interest and things like that, but that's all laid out in there pretty well. This was when we worked on with legal to make sure that it reflects those areas that we need to make sure are addressed. But that's kind of the impetus for why this is up here in the first place. Is we don't want to lay those or kind of create those agreements over and over and over again with people. They can figure out how to do that with our people, just not during our contract hours, and just leave us out of it.
All right, any questions from the board?
Madam Chair, a couple of times in here, it mentions full-time employees. I'm assuming part-time employees are not covered by this policy due to that language. And along those lines, I'm assuming since we draw paychecks as Board of Trustees members, are we considered employees, and does this not apply to us?
You are not a full-time employee, so I would say no, this does not apply to you.
Okay. Last thing I have, the president of the board does not have authority to approve agreements with the superintendent without bringing it to the full board, correct?
That's why we have these meetings.
Just
We
wanna double
approve
check.
them here.
Making sure that there was nothing in there that didn't slip through. So thank you. Happy to make a motion to propose oh, you know what? It's non-action. Great. We're
Yeah,
good.
This is a discussion item. So sorry, I did not state that at first, but this is a non-action item. So if there are any questions or recommendations, they can go to Mr. Anderson. Otherwise, we will see this again. Well, regardless, we will see this again on a future agenda. Are there any recommended changes, discussion points?
To your point about part-time versus full-time, I'll look into if that was intentional or if there's probably good reasons not to, because part-time could be, I do this for 5 hours a week, right? Like and then, so why would we have any input onto what they do the other hours? So I'll look into that a little more to see if there's maybe if part-time is like, 25 hours, like, could there be conflict? I'll just look into it a little more for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Transportation could be something that would be, easy of drivers jumping county lines.
All right, any other discussion on that item before we move on? All All right, seeing none, we'll move to item 3.1, which is our consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Brief question, Mr. Krinka, what is the last day to submit resignations without it triggering a? Thank you very much. And I'm assuming nothing in here would be beyond that date? Thank you.
All right, any other questions or discussion before we vote? All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye and the consent agenda is approved. Item 4.1 is a report from our NASB director.
All right, yeah, I headed down to Ely on Friday for a fairly quick meeting. We did have some pretty good substance though. And it started out talking about the certified public official framework that's expected to be rolled out this fall on the NASB website. They also plan on having a lot of the breakouts that occur during our yearly conference in December. A lot of those will be geared towards being able to complete or going towards the certified public official program. So it'll make that easier for us to complete. We also went through, they had $6,000 that had been sitting in a fund for quite a while. We ended up donating $2,000 of that to the Gwynn Center that does policy advocation. It's named after the former Governor Kenny Gwynn, but they do policy advocation, and we sent that to them with a request that it be used for education. And I think that we plan on doing that. It was going to be the whole amount, but we decided that it might be better to see what they do with the first two, and then continue on if that works. If not, find something else. Another thing that was covered is we nominated Wade Paulson again. He would be returning as the NIAA Region 3 representative. He's done a great job with that. Then we talked about the Teachers and Leaders Council representatives. Linda Gilkerson from Douglas County and our own Susan Neal are on that. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add on that, Susan, on what you'll be doing there.
Not really. I just found out.
Just found out. Okay. So looking forward to that, but was real happy to see your name there. And I know, with everything you do around already, that's just yet another thing we're going to have a great representative with. So happy to see that. Let's see. We also talked a little bit about local control over school start times. That was kind of a hot issue because it's been talked about. I'm trying to remember the exact context of it, and I didn't write it down in my notes.
So the State Board of Education wants to mandate that all high schools have, or, cannot start before X time, which I believe is 9 o'clock. And everybody was saying they need to not do that.
It was a pretty spirited discussion. I did bring up the fact that here in Elko County, we even have schools in different time zones. So, how does that work?
Which was shocking
So,
to some people.
But that was, but that's something for.
CJ had me sitting on a meeting last week that dealt with this the state board, and I tried to get on in time to make comment, and I was late and there was no way to do it, and so it didn't happen. But I sat through and listened to the whole thing, and the gist of what I got out of the meeting is this was targeted at Clark, and I didn't get the context of what was going on down there, but all the discussion kind of revolved around that. And then by the end of the meeting, the consensus I got was if they're going to do something, it's going to go Clark and Washoe, but they're going to give some kind of waiver to all the rural schools because the superintendent from Fallon, she did a great job representing how we all feel. And that was, I can run one bus. So I got to pick my kids up at 6 o'clock, bring them, and they sit at the high school until 9 until they start. The realities of where we live and what we do, it just wouldn't work. So at the start of that, I was real nervous because it wouldn't work for us for practice time, for all the other things that go on at the high schools. We just don't have the facilities. But by the end, I felt pretty confident that it's probably not going to happen because they were getting pushed back from boards, soups, and the only people who were for it were the people who were trying to get Clark for whatever they did. So just a little context on that.
Yeah, we had a pretty spirited discussion on that. Let's see, moving on, awards nominees for the yearly conference, those are due August 25th. So if we have anybody in mind or anything for that, that's when that due date is. And then coming up, there's a school safety conference, July 24th through 28th in Las Vegas. And then the next meeting for NASB will be in September. So, and that, I believe, is all I have on my report. Is there any questions?
So I believe the September meeting has the board meeting and then training following, right? Is that correct? It's a
that'll be
Friday.
more-
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a full weekend. I don't have an agenda on that yet. They haven't released, but that does include a training, and that will also be in Las Vegas, I believe. I have to look at the last.
Yeah,
email,
it's
but
September 8th and 9th.
8th and 9th.
So the
correct.
8th is the joint board meeting and the 9th will be the training.
Yeah.
Right. All right, any questions for Jeff? All right, moving on to item, Jeff, thank you for the report. Moving on to item 4.2, items from board members.
Madam Chair, I was remiss and I neglected to include Mrs. McDermott, and I believe Dr. Price was here as well in regards to recognizing and in support of Caden Rosengarten. So I apologize for that oversight. If I had not been running late, I may not have forgotten them. Also just wanted to wish all of you and all of our district employees, families, and neighbors a happy Independence Day.
Thank you. All right.
I do. I have a formal request. I'd love a request, time parameters we respect in regard to guest speakers to include an audible and visual timer, pre-screen slideshow, a predetermined amount of time set aside for special guests, notification of the length of the special speakers, reduction of the content included in primary content meeting in regards to those speakers as they speak.
All right. Thank you. All right, duly noted. Good suggestion. All right, any other items from board members before we move on to our superintendent's report? We'll move on to item 5.1. Mr. Anderson.
Hey, thanks. As much as we do appreciate all of our presenters, I do tell them 5 to 10 minutes, please. Sometimes those go a little over, sometimes they go a lot over. People are very passionate about what they're passionate about. And so, yeah, that's an ask from me. If we wanted to put something in I know we're shoring up a governance manual. I think if we wanted to make something like officially official, you could do something like that. But just note on that. I have very little that I'll share today. Lots going on, but I have lots of people that have asked me, hey, is it nice that it's the summer now and it's real chill in the offices? And I'm just like, you don't even know. There's a lot going on, and in preparation for 4-day and getting the time we had with our principals before they went off on their short break as well. But just a few things to keep you aware of, and things that are kind of worth noting. There are lots of bills that affect education. I had 10 pages of them that I went over with all of our district leadership yesterday, and to cover those with them. I can share such a document with you as well, so you're aware of what those are. It's very concise, but just to put that in frame of reference for you, 10 pages, and that's there's still more time to add to that from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I guess, to the last week. There were about, just off the top of my head, probably like a dozen more that were added that impact education in one way or another. And some of those are directly related to school boards and trustees, and I'll make sure to make you aware of what those are. Yeah, we'll keep updated on those. One of those that is quite impactful, but also somewhat it's a good thing, but also problematic in its own way is SB 231, and we're going to work through that. But that is money that is additional salary increase money, not having anything to do with the stuff that comes out of your own budget. It's additional funds, and we're not even going to know what our portion of that is until we know what our teachers are or our staff is as a percentage against the rest of the state. I think the concept is they will make available what you are proportionally as far as staff goes. So those numbers will have to be reported, and we'll eventually know what our portion of that is, and then how we can access that, because there are restrictions and guidelines. So we will keep you informed as that becomes relevant for you, but just wanted you to know what that one was about. We will have our next capital improvement committee meeting tomorrow. We had our first one a little while back, and we have our next one. I got a lot of feedback from site administrators on their own evaluation of MGT and what they thought that report did. And most of them thought pretty favorably of how well that captured their sites. And so we'll fill the capital improvement committee in on those things, as well as the effects of AB 519, which is the rural capital improvement bill that also includes an appropriation for Hawaii that we've talked about before. So we'll inform them on that stuff. Just as a way of note, because we won't be meeting again until July 18th, starting the week of July 10th, central office will not be open on Fridays. Given that all of our school sites are 100% going to be 4-day, central office will also be 4-day. And the reason we will start July 10th is because on weird weeks where you have paid holidays, it just makes sense to be in the other 4 days. So the first official week of 4-day is actually a 5-day week, with 4th of July being on a Tuesday. But just anticipate that starting on the week of the 10th, we will not be here to answer phones or do much of anything, at least in the office. My understanding from superintendents who've been existing in this is they too laugh when people say, "Oh, it must be nice to have Fridays off." And in the world of school administration, there are very few days off ever, even when you're taking a day off. And then something that we'll have Paul report on or give us a little bit of feedback on is we found out recently that Elko is going to be hosting a mass casualty event, mass casualty prevention event. I shouldn't have said it the way I said it. That's like when people say cancer, support cancer. Like, well, it's not what you mean, but a mass casualty prevention training that law enforcement, district personnel, emergency operations personnel will be able to participate in. And so we'll have district representation at that, but wanted you to know that was coming, and I'm going to leave it at that for me today, unless you have something you would like me to report about.
Any questions for our superintendent? All right.
Commissioner Anderson, sorry, briefly, the school board being appointed by the governor or the state or whatever, not being elected out of Clark. I will be honest with you, there were so many bills, I didn't track them all. Is that one that we haven't heard yet, or was that passed, defeated?
Of being able to appoint school boards, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one didn't pass as far as I know. The one that did, and it only affects Clark, is Clark will have 4 new, they will be appointed non-voting board members on their board. So I mean, yeah. It's only them. So they get 4 people who get to
Just want that on
say a
record.
lot of stuff and make a lot of noise and don't have any vote in anything.
Gotcha. Madam Chair, or Madam President, if I may, and I do apologize in hearing Mr. Anderson's report, the Debt Management Commission, the next Debt Management Commission will be August 10th at 9 a.m. That has been scheduled. There are only 2 Debt Management Commission meetings a year. And we, as the school district, have specifically been asked if we would be prepared for whatever we normally present on, that there may be questions from the commission. That was in the February meeting. So Julie just wanted to make sure to give you as much advance notice as possible on that.
Thanks. We do have a meeting just for your awareness, and we'll have several more, I'm sure, between now and August when our documents are due to them, that to discuss the impacts of the rural education capital improvement funding bill and how that fits into our plans. And so we'll continue to make sure that's all worked through, and taking into consideration recommendations from the capital improvement committee from our last meeting that we had. We set today as a meeting, and I think they even wanted to meet one more time between tomorrow's meeting and August. So we'll have lots of conversation and make sure we're ready to talk about it.
And Matt, are you our debt management commission representative?
Yes, I apologize.
So I was just going to make sure you are planning on attending that meeting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Hopefully all time
Okay.
too.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move to item 6.1? All right, we're going to go ahead and move to the approval of the accounts payable.
Move to approve the accounts payable.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion, abstentions, or disclosures?
Julie, go ahead. If there's an abstention or whatnot, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to disclose that I have a family member that works for Wells Rural Electric, but I will not be abstaining from voting because I'm not materially affected by this.
All right. Thank you. Ditto to Brooke. Anyone else? Any discussion?
Julie, at the top of page 5, there's a Title IX designation. No, Title VI designation. And I think that one was a little bit newer. If I understood correctly, that is a purpose to allow grants from state educational agency. Is that correct? And actually, you know what? I apologize. It said 11A, not 11.6. So maybe I'm mistaken.
You on page 5?
Was on page 5, and previously it had said 11A. However, maybe now
It's still there.
5 items down.
11A is there still.
At the very top.
Oh, very top. Sorry, 11.6, or sorry, Title
Sorry.
6 is there, but yes, 11A at the very top, tuition reimbursement.
I'll have to look it up and get back to you.
I know
The 280
the
is,
answer to it.
you know that one? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So that is a Title 11A seeks to make sure that students that are underprivileged or underrepresented in various ways have access to high quality teachers. And so something this does come from grant funds. And so or I guess title funds, but they're through the grant office. And this is something I think Cassie Stalke has talked about before, but something we decided to do with some of our funding that, and this is an allowable expense, is to take staff who are seeking to become teachers, they're paraprofessionals, have an interest in being a teacher, that we would reimburse some of their tuition to enable them to be able to make that move up and help us solve some of our hiring problems, and also make sure our kids have access to trained teachers. So that is what tuition reimbursement means. That means that person is getting some of their college paid so they can be a teacher in Elko County.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? All right, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Chair votes aye and the motion carries. All right, that moves us to item 8.1. Oh, pause before we adjourn. The budget needs to be signed by everyone. It is coming down, so do not leave until you have signed it, please. All right, we'll
Madam Chair,
Sure.
or Madam
Go ahead.
President, is that also for the resolution
let's see.
for the
Yes, it will be.
interfund?
Yes, so
loans?
please don't leave until you have signed the budget and the resolutions. Otherwise, meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming and being with us. Have a fabulous 4th.